Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Right-Click Tools over the ConfigMgr Fast Channel webinar. My name is Chris Muster. I'm the CTO here at Recast Software, and today I'm joined by Brian Dam, one of the software engineers responsible for doing the majority of the work on this feature. Brian's going to be showing us the how to use the right-click tools over the Fast Channel, as well as describing some of the setup processes around it. We're also joined by Marty Miller, our customer success manager. And if you've ever had a technical question about the right-click tools, you've probably interacted with Marty in some way, either through the website chat or support email. Marty's going to be keeping an eye on any questions that come up throughout the webinar. If you do have a question throughout, at any point in the webinar, you can use the Q&A button inside of the Zoom application, and he'll try to get that answered in real time. If you're watching this on the YouTube live stream, you can use the YouTube chat, and we're going to try to keep an eye on any questions that come in through that as well. Before we jump right in, we thought we'd start with a poll. So we're curious about how many people out there are using some of these features inside a ConfigMgr, CMG scripts, both, none yet. And the reason we're kind of curious about this is we actually utilize the run scripts feature of ConfigMgr in order to enable fast channel support. And by no means do you need to be a PowerShell export to use it. We actually provide the PowerShell script that you would need to use inside of the newest version of the right-click tools. It's in the extras folder of the install directory that you can use to import there. Then we're also curious about CMG because that's one of the more interesting use cases of the right-click tools over Fast Channel, is that you can actually run the right-click tools over the CMG on devices that are disconnected. So it looks like we got quite a few people responding with that. So it's probably worth talking about the why. Why would you use right-click tools on the ConfigMgr Fast Channel? And there are a number of reasons you might do that, right? So and they all actually have to do with some of the more common questions we get from admins that are new to the right-click tools. Why am I getting an access denied error? Why do I get computer is not on error? Those types of things. The Fast Channel actually solves a lot of those, right? So access denied, you have to be local admin to run the right-click tools in a default installation. By utilizing the Fast Channel, the actions actually run in the system context that the ConfigMgr client is running in, right? Because we're sending the action to the PowerShell script that gets run by the client, and it's running as local system. So you don't have to worry about admin rights anymore on the devices. And because that ConfigMgr client is actually maintaining a persistent outbound connection to the management point, you no longer have to worry about opening firewall ports into the device itself, right? So you don't need to enable remote SMB, remote WMI, remote registry, any of those things. So it can be, it's incredibly useful to utilize that because you're reducing your risk, right, in the environment. You're not opening ports to your devices. You're saying we trust the ConfigMgr platform to handle this communication layer instead. And actually, we've had a solution since 4.0 to handle some of this in our Recast agent. So we've since October we've had this ability to install something on the devices and remove the requirement to run right-click tools with admin rights, remove the requirement for these firewall requirements. And we always pitched it as workgroup support, but it actually works the same way. But what's probably most interesting, in my opinion, by enabling right-click tools to work over the Fast Channel is that last bit, being able to run right-click tools over the Cloud Management Gateway. So you can now run your devices even when they're not on the corporate network. Right? Before this support, you had to have your end users be on the corporate network in some way, even if that was VPN, right? The actions may still work if you're on VPN, but this removes that requirement altogether. So moving on to architecture and kind of how this looks inside of the Recast Management Server. We do require a Recast Management server for this. So high level, you run the right-click tools. the right-click tools run an action in the exact same way they always do, right? They send the action up to the Recast management server and say, hey, I want to run this action. And the server decides based on your configuration where it's going to send this action, right? It might send it to a Recast agent if you have the Recast agent route configured. It might send it to a service account if you have it configured that way. And new in this version is the ability to send it to the ConfigMgr Fast Channel. Now, you note here, we do have a Recast proxy requirement on that. So the management server doesn't actually do anything itself. It always just sends actions along to things that can actually implement them. And the Recast proxy in this scenario is responsible for translating the data that it gets from the right-click tools into something that the PowerShell script can understand. And the PowerShell script sits inside of your ConfigMgr server. So it does that translation, sends the data onto the ConfigMan server, and the server is responsible for reaching out to the ConfigMan clients themselves. And one thing to note there is we have a with Recast agent on it, and we actually do require that you install a WMI provider on your ConfigMan clients in order to facilitate this communication. And the reason for that is because the ConfigMgr Fast Channel by default doesn't allow you to send large amounts of data over it, right? It's limited to something like 80 kilobytes, and that was actually causing issues for some of our actions. And so what the WMI provider does is it provides a stateful way for us to break up the data returned by the action so that we can guarantee all of the data gets back up to your right-click tools, right? And so the scenario we were hitting this in is, for example, in the system information tool and the add remove programs tab, there was just too much add remove program data. It wasn't sending all the data back. It was just kind of quitting out before all of that had hit that. So that's why we have that Recast agent requirement there. It's purely for the WMI provider. You don't have to actually connect it to your Recast management server if you don't want. And because of some of those requirements, this is enterprise only. And I'd highly recommend you get on the newest May release before trying this feature. So with that said, Brian's going to take us through the product walkthrough and how all this works.
There we go. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. So yeah, I'm just going to do a quick walkthrough and kind of show you some of the problems we're trying to solve, and then show you just briefly how you would set up the fast channel support and the agent, and we'll try and show you the results. So let's start from the beginning, right? What are the current problems we're trying to solve? And Chris alluded to these earlier. Here we have a collection of devices that have our agent installed. And you can see there's kind of a mix here. We got some normal PC 01 and through 04. These are just kind of normal devices sitting on the network. They're connected. They're domain joined. We have a bunch of workgroup devices. And then we have CMG 01 here, which is completely disconnected from this particular network. We have no direct way of reaching out to the device and running actions upon it. So on these, in additionally, PC02 is configured in a very particular way where we don't have permissions on it. Where remote management is disabled. So even though it is domain joined, even though it is online, if we attempt to remotely run something like a remote PowerShell or remote WMI, it's going to fail on us. And this is what it looks like when we go ahead and run something like the system information tool, which is a great tool to break things with, because the system information tool uses a bunch of different techniques to reach out and get data. So you can see here we got those 6 successful devices out of 11 came back very, very quickly. And what we're waiting for is the one that has remote WMI disabled. So we'll wait for that to come in here, but we'll talk about these errors are ridiculously common. Marty gets to deal with these every single day, right? Access is denied. Well, in this case, it's because it's workgroup devices, right? They're not domain joined. Nothing we do or could do are going to allow you to remotely access these devices using an account that they're right. The computer is not on. Well, that's our CMG01, right? Computer not on basically means we can't ping it, we can't reach it. It doesn't seem to be on the network. And that's true in the case of CMG01. And then here's the last one that many, many people have seen, the RPC server is unavailable. And here's our PCO2. And what this means is that, again, it's domain joined, so I have local, I have rights to this device. I can reach it. It's reachable via the network, but I am being, remote management is disabled either in terms of the service is disabled, not running, or the firewall, in the firewall, the ports are being blocked, right? And so all of this is part of where our recast agent comes in. And I want to be super clear. The three devs, each of us have started in systems administration, and we have, each of us have over a decade in it. We hate agents. We're not fans. In fact, saying recast, I fought tooth and nail initially to not have an agent or call it an agent, even though it was. And the reality, though, is that at some point they became limiting. Our story over the last year or so has, actually last 2 years, has been trying to remove obstacles to being able to run our tools on a diverse set of devices. And so the whole proxy stuff that Chris was talking about came about in the 4.0 architecture last year, and that got us into some untrusted domain scenarios. But when you talk about workgroup devices that don't have a domain, when you talk about devices that are off your network, and more we're finding companies that fall into one of two categories. Either they want to disable some of that remote management stuff. So they don't want remote PowerShell, they don't want remote WMI, and they don't want the admin shares. And a lot of that, it's hard to, we would argue you can do some of that stuff securely, but even so, it's never quite as secure as just straight up disabling and preventing those things. And so we sometimes try to help our customers have that argument, but at the same time, as system administrators ourselves, we know you don't always get to make those decisions, right? Sometimes security is just going to tell you, we really don't care what the ramifications are. You are going to disable these features for security reasons. And in those cases, you're just straight out of luck, right? We can't remotely reach out to that device and administrate it remotely, then our tools are dead in the water. And access is denied, right? In this case, we're looking at work groups. That's the reason we don't have permissions on these boxes. But more and more, for the same reasons, security departments are trying to limit the amount of administrative access, right? So to run our tools, you kind of need remotely, you need one of two things. You need to be you need an account that's local administrator on that box. Now you can do that with a service account, right? And you can lock a service account down in some way, or in a bunch of different ways, but at the end of the day, it still ends up being a single set of credentials that has local admin access to a lot of your environment, or you can give your individual administrators that access, right? So now you have a lot of accounts that have a local administrator on a lot of boxes. And again, a lot of organizations are walking that back and trying to restrict who has that kind of access. And in those cases, there's just no option for us to run our tools remotely. And so even though we might hate the fact that we need an agent, in those scenarios, it becomes limiting to say, well, we don't have one, therefore we just don't work. So yes, we have an agent. And the thing I want to make clear is we're committed to the agentless model as well. We will continue to develop these tools with the mindset of trying to do as much as we can without needing an agent. But again, we just kind of came to a crossroads where it's like, yeah, we need code. We need to put our code on the endpoint so we can call it remotely and solve a bunch of these issues that our customers were having. That being said, there's a couple of limitations of the agent, right? So there's some tools we have, right-click tools, that are very popular, in fact, that are not going to work with an agent. And a couple of those, internally we call those the local tools. So there's some things like right-click on a device and opening the $, opening the remote registry, opening up the remote event viewer. Those tools, all they really do, they're shortcuts in the console to point to a local tool, right? In the case of registry, it's regedit, right? We're going to open up regedit and tell regedit to connect to a device remotely. Well, having an agent in that case doesn't really help. C $sign is, again, open up Windows Explorer and simply browse to the share on this device. Well, that's not going to work if the agent isn't going to solve that problem. We actually have some ideas along those lines. We're actually enterprise C $sign. Chris is telling me that we actually have some ideas, and we're looking at ways of making that possible too, but it involves in some cases reinventing the wheel, right? Like registry editor, we'd have to build our own registry editor, which isn't out of the question. But I'd love to see some engagement in user voice, or sorry, not I shouldn't say user voice. Our feature request board on recastsoftware.com. And if you want to see some of those things enabled, go ahead and vote them up, because yes, they're kind of reinventing the wheel, but we sometimes we'd love to do that. So. Lastly, what I want to show you about the agent is how to actually deploy it. So the intent of the agent is that you don't install it by hand. That's clearly ridiculous. And so I was responsible for the installer of the agent, and I put a lot of effort into trying to make sure that it is very easy to deploy, and that it installs, uninstalls, repairs, and upgrades silently. So we're going to go ahead and find the agent. I'm going to just go ahead and show you what the command line looks like. It's just an MSI, right? So it's nothing too crazy. You can call it with the typical. You can just load it into ConfigMgr. There's two parameters that I want to talk about. The first is RCT Enterprise Server, and again, this is all documented on our website, so you don't need to try to remember this exact spelling or anything like that. But the first thing we need to give it is the enterprise server if you want to connect it, have it connect to the enterprise server and work in the agent mode. And what we need here is the full URL, the same URL you would use to reach the recast management server. And if you just provide this, what it's going to do is actually connect to that server, and it'll actually go ahead and download the license. So the agent itself needs to be licensed. And if you just specify the server here, it'll go ahead and download that license. But if you're currently in a totally disconnected scenario, right? If right now all of your employees, let's just spitball and say all your employees are working from home right now, and they don't have a VPN connection. Well, that's not going to work, right? They're not going to be able to reach the enterprise server. And in that case, what you can there's another parameter you can use here. I believe it's license path. Again, it's on our docs website. But you can just specify the name of a file, your license file, that you can download from your recast portal, and you can take that license and make it part of the content here of this application. And then when the installer goes through, it'll go ahead and just suck in that license and put it where it needs to be. So that, in terms of deploying the agent, we try to make it as easy as possible. Again, the agent is extremely. Everyone says this, so you're not gonna believe me. I know it, but I'm telling you, we try to make the agent as lightweight and unobtrusive as possible. The agent, as Chris alluded to, is really just a WMI provider. It's sitting there just waiting for somebody to be called. So there's no scheduled data gathering. There's no schedule there that's going to kick off something and start sucking up a whole bunch of CPU. It's really just sitting there waiting to be called, either over the fast channel or directly by the recast management server. So in terms of being concerned about, is this agent going to go rogue on us? If you're not getting complaints now about the impact of running an action on a device, I perceive no reason why you would start having that just because of the agent. Because again, we have no scheduled tasks that are running that are trying to gather data or any of those kinds of things. Okay, we have the agent deployed to a bunch of boxes. The last thing we need to do here is go ahead and set up a route. So what I just did went into the recast management server itself, right? And we're looking at the routes tab here. And if you're a community user or you use enterprise standalone, what you are using is what we would call the ConfigMgr console user proxy. And what that means to us, proxy is actually a bit of a misnomer here. It's the idea that the action you're running is going to run as the user running the console. So it's going to use their credentials or their authentication or their context. And it's going to run from the device that they're running the console from. And so if you have any of those, so if that user doesn't have local administrator, if the user, if you've disabled the remote window management stuff, all the things we just showed you that broke, it's because we're trying to use this console proxy. And so if you deploy the agent, you want to go ahead and prioritize the agent proxy here. And I'll go ahead and say this. And in fact, I meant to preface right with the routes. The concept of routes here is very much that similar to any a firewall route or a routing table. If you've done any kind of networking and come across those, and the idea is right here's a bunch of rules for how we're going to figure out how the server is going to figure out. Well, how do I get this action to the device? And priority matters, right? So the server is going to start from the top here and work its way down to try and find a way that it can run this. So what I just did right here is simply just take our agent proxy and went ahead and put it at the very top. So what this is going to do then, if there's an agent and it's talking to the server is going to take the first choice it's going to do is say, well, I'm just going to send this action directly to that device. So you can see here we have 5 failures and 6 successes. Now we just prioritize that. We're now using the agent. You can see, boom, we got all of those except for one, and we'll show that in a second, suddenly started working. And you can see that happened very, very quickly. This shouldn't really slow you down in any really perceptible kind of way using this agent. You can see all our workgroup devices have now returned results. You can see that PCO2 returned its results. The one that didn't, of course, is the CMGO1, because this requires us to actually use the fast channel. And there's a couple of other things you need to do to go ahead and set up the fast channel. So now that you have the agent installed, how do we solve this guy with the fast channel? For the first step you're going to do is we need to import that script that Chris was talking about. When we say fast channel support, I mean fast channel is really an underlying technology within ConfigMgr. And it's actually, a lot of us, it might seem new, but it actually goes back to the ConfigMgr 2012 days. It used to be called the big green button, where they developed it primarily for SCEP, or what we know as SCEP today. The idea is to get to be able to very quickly push out the latest Defender, what we know now as Defender definitions, right? If you needed to get those out quickly, they had no good way of doing that. So that's actually what it was all created for. So the scripts feature, though, that's built on top of the fast channel, and that's how we're integrating with the fast channel, is to have this script. The script itself is very, very kind of benign. In fact, in terms of length, the vast majority of the script is spent signing it, right? Signing itself. It is a signed script, right? That's the script right there. A bunch of parameters and calling the WMI provider. So it's a very simple script. There's no real magic there. By all means, take a look at it if you want to make sure we're not doing something crazy. But all you need to do is go ahead and import this script, which we'll do. And when you do this, I should have specified that this script is available. It's in the right-click tools install directory under a folder called extras, right? So if you install the latest version of the right-click tools, you will find this script in there. So we can go ahead and we can import that script. We can name it whatever you want. Because for us, we don't care what you name the script. We don't care. All we care about is the hash of the script. So when the recast management server goes ahead and looks for the script, it's going to look at the hash values, and it's going to pick the first one that matches the right hash. So it just doesn't matter what you name it, what you do with it, as long as it's there, we will use it. We'll go ahead and approve my own script, and in doing so, make a mockery of the whole approval process. There we go. We have that script. It's in there. And then the next thing you need to do, similar to when we talked about the agent, is we need to make a route. And in order for the fast channel support to work, we need a couple of things. First, we need to start with a list of devices, right? And when we talk about a list of devices within the recast management server, what we're talking about is a scope, and that's similar if you're used to the RBAC model in ConfigMgr. we're trying to use that terminology because it's a similar concept, right? What are the things we're going to act upon? So what we need here is a list of devices that have the config manager agent on them, right? And so for that reason, you're going to create a scope. I don't care what you name it. I don't care any of those things, but you're going to pick one of these two, either config manager site or config manager device collection. If you pick the site, we're just going to consume all the devices, right? Any device that's on that site, we're going to go ahead and consume it. If you have a bunch of servers though, like if you're managing servers with config manager, you may not want that, right? There's no reason to try and reach out over the fast channel to a server, because assumably the servers, you never need to reach it over the CMG. It should be in your data center with great connectivity. So for that reason, you might pick a device collection, right? So if you have a workstation group, or if you have specifically a collection for laptops, right? Again, those are the only things you would sort of expect to need to reach over the fast channel or the CMG. And you can go ahead and select that. We already have one here, so I'm not going to create one. We have a specific fast channel collection, and you can see here is the device collection ID. So it's just a very specific collection. We already have that. What we need to do is go ahead and create a route. And so we're going to do that. We're going to say, hey, we're going to make a ConfigMgr Fast Channel route. Here we're going to pick that scope I just showed you. But the thing here is we need to pick a proxy, and I want to kind of explain that briefly. So we have this scope, and it's a list of devices, but that's not just it, right? It's not just a matter of that they are in Config Manager. There's a couple of requirements that we have to successfully run an action using the fast channel. The first is that there's a Config Manager agent on it, right? And specifically that the agent is, I want to say it's 1702, but I might be making that up, when they introduced the scripts feature, right? At some point, the scripts feature was put out into current branch, and we need to make sure that you have agent at least that version or newer. I believe the version it was released in is no longer in support, so that's why I'm a little fuzzy on the exact version of it. But if you have a supported version of Config Manager current branch, you have an agent that will support this. The other part we need though is our own agent, right? We need to make sure that our code, our agent, is sitting on the endpoint and can be called. And so for that reason, we're using Config Manager's hardware inventory to make sure that those two things exist, that there is an agent, that Config Manager agent is there, and that our own agent is there. And and that's what the proxy here is doing, right? We're fixing that proxy. And the proxy is going to make sure that those things happen. It's also the proxy is also the thing that's going to call out, that's going to call the script in Config Manager, right? I showed you that script. Something has to call it. So this proxy was going to need those kinds of rights to read and run actions in Config Manager. The last thing I want to say about the proxy part of it is that because of what I just described, using hardware inventory to get that data, none of this would be instantaneous, right? So if you want to set this up, and it shouldn't take all that long, agent gets installed, well, that's great, but the agent needs to get installed, and hardware inventory needs to run on that box, needs to come up to the Config Manager site, get processed, and our scopes need to catch that change, right? So it's going to take, could be a few hours if you don't. If your hardware inventory is every 7 days, it could take a lot longer. So maybe you want to push that along and use our tools to do that. But just understand, if you set this up, it may not magically all happen instantaneously. So we just added this new route, and we're going to move this not quite to the top. We're going to move this to the second. I'm going to show you why in a sec and explain why in a second. So we're going to go ahead and save that. We're going to rerun these tools. The reason for not putting to the top, hopefully you're going to see here. Ooh. Beautiful. We'll see if this works. The reason you don't necessarily want to put that first, the fast channel first, is because it's actually not as fast. It's not as fast as our SignalR agent. And it actually takes a while to get that data over the fast channel. As we're seeing here, we're waiting for that device, and I'm hoping it's going to succeed here. But the fast channel, again, when I talk about that technology, it goes back several years. And we're actually using a technology, if you care to know, it's called SignalR, and it was built much more recently than the fast channel was, and it's really built around that concept of how do I have a bunch of different devices that are all. Let me try and save this again. And it's around devices, it's meant to do exactly that. So I love that I tried this like 5 different times this morning to make sure that my demo worked. And then, of course, when I do it live, the demo gods are not smiling on me.
You should check out that monitoring node, Brian. See if that script is actually running.
Oh yeah, is that on? That was totally on the agenda, but I never do it. So in the monitoring, you can go ahead and you can go to the script status because again, we're just using the ConfigMgr scripts, right? And so you can go in here and get the last update time. Let's look at the most recent one. Let's see if it's what it's doing here. Well, it doesn't even look like it's running.
I think if you sort by client operation ID.
Is that it? There we go. Yeah. Oh, okay. So it is still running. So we're still waiting for that to execute. I'm not sure why that is the case, but again, we're just using the script feature. So you can see here we have a whole bunch of them here. I'm actually going to go ahead and try this again. What I'm going to do is get rid of my stupid Namerson script and give it a shot here. So let's go to scripts. Maybe I done goofed when I did my script, which would be very much like me. We remember when I was talking about the whole hashing thing. You can see we actually have. It was saying it's just going to load which the first one it found. And so you actually saw it loaded my script first, even though we have it imported here multiple times. So let's go ahead and just delete that dumb script and let's try this again. And maybe we can get a actual result. Oh, that's client information. We should use. I like using system information. I shouldn't be that that picky, but okay. Again, you saw we got our 10 results very, very quickly. Let's go look at the monitoring node. Let's see if it's. Oh, there you go. Didn't use that one anyways. Oh. And you can see again here, it is still running. So I don't know if I messed up that device. Maybe I messed up the CMD device. Oh no, hey, there you go. There it is. Sorry for that complete and utter runaround, but there we have the CMG device. We can see that all 11 of these devices have now successfully returned results. So glad that that didn't work as nicely as it did the other times it tested. 2 things I want to talk about. Actually, just one really is there is a couple of limitations of using the fast channel. There's some actions we have that currently we don't properly support. If you're an enterprise user and you're using Builder, currently the way that is architected will not work over the fast channel. And the same thing for Kiosk Manager. In some of those cases, it's just those features are architected on connectivity to the Recast management server. And so we are looking at talking about how we can make sure that those work over the fast channel. But if you go to implement this and you're heavily using Kiosk Manager or Builder, neither of those two are currently going to work over the fast channel. They will work perfectly over the agent, right? They will work fine there. But if you are relying on the fast channel, it's not currently not supported, although we are working on it. So that is all I have for the walkthrough. I'm done showing stuff. If you guys have questions, we'll try and answer them live if we can, and we'll see how Marty does.
Yeah, and I just want to share the poll results here. It looks like a number of you are running scripts, which is great to see. And actually a lot of people are running both CMG and scripts. So um, that's awesome. I'll turn it over to Marty now for any questions.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. My name is Marty Miller, and I'm the Customer Success Manager. We've got a couple of questions that have come in, and if you have other questions, you can absolutely go ahead and ask those. And we'll just go ahead and get started. Will this only work over CMG, or can it be configured over the traditional configuration? And I think Brian tried to explain a little bit is that, you know, you can actually run these actions over the fast channel if you wanted to, but there's a little bit of a misnomer with how fast the fast channel actually is. Like you said, our agent, doing it with the agent will actually be faster than if you're doing it over the fast channel with devices that are connected. So fast channel is going to be, or CMG is going to be mostly important for devices that don't have a different connection into the recast management server. All right.
So, right, you're talking about, you know, will it work over internet-based client management, right? If that's the question, then the answer is I want to say yes. It boils down to does scripts. If the scripts feature works over internet-based client management, then our fast channel support should. And I'm literally looking up the docs right now. Obviously, we all know that it works over the CMG. Oh yeah, there you go. I'm looking at unsupported features right now. Yeah, the docs, my initial reaction looking at the docs is that yes, it should work over traditional internet-based client management.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian.
But I could be wrong.
There wouldn't be the first time, right? How does or does it not work with the co-management of Intune or only with Intune? So this is going to work with devices that need to be into the config. They need to be in ConfigMgr, right? You're not going to be able to run actions against devices that are only in Intune. So as long as we can see them in the ConfigMgr console, and we can run actions against those, we should be able to run actions against those devices. All right. Just to confirm that this new version, which does not require firewall permissions to use the tools, is only available in the enterprise version of Right-Click Tools and not the community free version. Yes, we can confirm that. The underlying way that we're doing this with using the recast management server with proxies and all that kind of stuff is part of the enterprise version. So you would need to be an enterprise customer in order to do what we were just talking about here as well. Where should the recast proxy be installed? And then it said, i.e. the site server. So the recast proxy really can be installed any place where it can, it essentially can be installed on any computer as long as it is able to read from the domain controller, essentially. What we're using it for in this instance is actually to populate those scopes that we showed you. So as long as it is in the domain and able to read from the domain controller, it should be able to do what it needs to do. The site server would absolutely be fine. We've done quite a few setups that way where all of that is right on the site server or a site server. So
Yeah,
either
and
of those would work. Go ahead.
just to riff on that a little bit, the default recast management server install actually prompts you to install a recast proxy, and that proxy is perfectly fine to use, you know, as long as you configure it. And actually, that's what Brian was demoing today, is the recast proxy that gets installed with the recast management server.
Yeah,
great.
But that actually leads really, really well into the other question. So Travis is asking, right? You know, we don't want to install the agent, but we want to support an untrusted forest, and that's actually why you would have multiple proxies, right? So yes, you need a proxy for the patch channel stuff, right, to call in and make that. But if you have a untrusted domain and you want to run actions in there, that's actually what we created initially kind of created the proxy to support. So no, you don't technically need our agent. What you need to do is in that case, you would install this proxy in that untrusted domain. We really don't care what again, what Marty just said, right? As long as it's in that untrusted domain, and within that untrusted domain, it's running on a service account that is trusted and is a local admin on the boxes that are in that untrusted domain. That's how we support that scenario. Again, specifically, that's the untrusted domain or untrusted force scenario. It's the case where you would install the proxy, not on in that case, the site server is probably not the best place to do it. You need to install it somewhere in that untrusted domain. But if it's on the management point, or if you have any existing infrastructure for ConfigMgr within that environment, that's perfect. That works too.
And just to get back on the not interested in installing the agent, the Recast agent itself is really just a Windows service and a WMI provider. And the Windows service is what maintains connectivity back to the Recast management server. If you want to guarantee that you're not connecting back, you could just disable the Windows service. We wouldn't care. The WMI provider still works the same way. And again, that WMI provider is really just about providing state to break up the action results that you get from calling the action, so that we guarantee that the results get back over that fast channel.
Very good. Next question, is it right to say that the former Recast proxy application is rebranded to the Recast agent application with the extension of using the fast channel? So here's how, let me explain a little bit about how Recast proxy has changed. So originally we had a Recast, what we would call a service account proxy, and a Recast device proxy. What has ended up changing is that the service account proxy, which runs on the machine, uses a service account, is just now called Recast proxy. So we've changed that. And the device proxy has been changed to the Recast agent. So what we tried to do by creating a little bit of confusion right now is to hopefully help with confusion in the future, just so that when it's actually working on a computer, for the computer, I would think of that as the agent, and when it's a proxy where it's trying to populate scopes and do actions against other computers, that would be your proxy, which is maintained by that service account.
Yeah, and if you need somebody to blame for that confusion, it's all me, 100%. I fought tooth and nail not to call it Recast device proxy instead of what it really is, an agent. So it's all my fault. Sorry, everyone.
But it's been fixed, so it's all good going forward. I missed the beginning. Is there an extra cost if you are already using Enterprise? Excellent question. There is no additional cost if you are already using Enterprise. This is a function of the tools that are already available to you, and just need to be essentially configured to work in this way. What I'm going to do is throw out a plug. If you do have any questions about it, or if you're concerned about how this should all be set up, you can absolutely go onto our website. And if chat is open, you can open a chat window. Otherwise, you can schedule a time to meet with one of us, and we'll help you out with how exactly you want to architect how everything will work. All right. Is there a particular reason for the introduction of agent licensing, and therefore an additional level of complexity versus just having the Recast server be the sole point of licensing? So the reason, essentially the difference is we need the agent licensing when there isn't a connection that can be made back to the Recast management server. When a connection can be made back to the Recast management server, it'll absolutely do what it's always done. It'll go ahead and pull the license file, it'll save it where it needs to go, and the licensing works that way. So what we needed to do was figure out a way to make it so that if I can't always make, or if I can't make a connection to the Recast management server, how can we verify that we actually do have a license? And so the way we did that was setting up, adding the license file into the correct place.
Yeah, and just to, go ahead, Brian.
I was going to riff on that a little bit. I mean, part of it, we don't want to encourage this scenario, but we want to support it, which is that you would install the agent, but it wouldn't be installed in, I forget if we have a name for it, but local only mode, right? It's not going to reach out to the recast management server. And why would you do that? Because you have somebody in an organization that doesn't want to open up a port, right? We don't want the recast, we don't want devices reaching out to the recast management server over port 444 or whatever port you choose, right? Somebody doesn't want to open that port for you. In that case, the agent needs to be run in a way that it never, ever, ever talks to the recast management server, because it can't. And for that reason, it needs to cache the license. Now, that's why we added in the latest release that if it can reach out, it will grab that license and it will make sure that it has a valid license for when it goes offline. But we had to add licensing to support that specific scenario. But I wouldn't encourage people to go that way, the way that they only use the fast channel, for the reasons I hopefully showed in the demo, which is the fast channel really isn't as fast as using the agent. Did I cover it, Chris? Or?
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
Great. So question is, when will this be out of fast channel branch and be available to current channel for production? Okay, let me step back. We may have been a little bit confusing about wording, or maybe it's Microsoft's fault on the different release channels or whatever that they have. So this is going to work on any current version of ConfigMgr, right? So this is available to any current
Current branch.
Supported
branch.
Of current branch.
Yeah, because there's LTS. If you want to get to like LTSP.
Oh, sure. Okay. So any current version of current branch, this will absolutely work. The reason that we're saying fast channel is that's actually part of ConfigMgr, and it deals with how the communication happens between ConfigMgr and your clients. It isn't necessarily only available to the fast ring or the slow ring or whatever. That was the word I was looking for, was ring.
And if you're talking about our versions, right? Like this is part of a monthly release. We popped it out in the May release. Our 4.3 release will be coming in June, or we'll wrap up the development in June, and it'll probably be released sometime in July. So if that's what you're wondering, 4.3 will be out with this feature next month.
Excellent. I think I've got one in the chat. Can we take away the need to have admin access without having to use exclusively fast channel? So yes, so essentially by doing the Recast agent install, if you do the full install of Recast agent, that would make it so that you did not have to worry about admin access. Now just remember that those are going to need to be installed on each of the devices that you want to run that way. So you're going to have to install that on each of your clients that you want to administer without admin access. All right. If you have any additional questions, you can keep asking. Does Recast agent show up in the system tray, or is it pretty much hidden? It will not show up in the system tray. It is just a service that is running in the background, very much, pretty much hidden is probably a good way to describe it.
Yeah, the only place you should see it is in the services.msc.
Yep. Do we have to install it on specific computers or all? Then the route priority determines when it is used. So that's going to depend. That's going to depend a little bit on how your environment is and how you are trying to what problems maybe that you're trying to solve. So it's going to maybe depend a little bit. I can see it on situations where you are going to do it just on specific computers. If you have specific computers that can only communicate maybe over the CMG, and you want to do them that way. Or you can put it on all of them as well, because then you wouldn't have to worry about the admin access or the firewall rules or any of that kind of stuff for all of those computers. Route priority, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, just to give more color on the route priority bit of that, right?
Sure.
The recast agent route, the one that Brian put on the very top when he was doing his demo, that will kind of route actions to devices that are currently connected right now, at the time of route evaluation, to the recast management server. So any device that has an open connection, it'll get sent over that route. The devices that aren't openly connected will fall back to the next route in the list, right? And in Brian's case, that was the ConfigMgr Fast Channel route. And that route filters devices based on the scope, right? Which site, ConfigMgr site you've pointed at, and possibly which collection you've pointed at. So it'll limit it to either devices in that collection or devices in that site, but then it'll further filter it based on the ConfigMgr client version and the recast agent version that's detected on that device. So devices that are in that collection that don't have the recast agent will not have the action sent to them. It'll just fall back to the next route in the list. And in that, in Brian's example, that was the ConfigMgr console user proxy route. So that's kind of how that works. If you ran it on a larger collection of devices that didn't have the recast agent installed, the devices that didn't have that agent installed would fall back to the third route in that list.
Yeah, not to put it too fine point out, like another example I could see there is in terms of picking and choosing, right? Like you might choose your laptops, or maybe you have what at my last organization we called a protected zone, right? Like a PCI or HIPAA kind of zone, and you're getting pushback in terms of who has it. Maybe you're fine generally having opening up some of the firewall and remote management and local admin on most boxes, but there's a particular zone in your organization where it's more secure for whatever reason. You can just deploy just the agent to those, optionally even just in the fast channel kind of mode. So yeah, you can pick and choose, and we'll try and do the best thing we can.
All right. If you have a question or comment, we can take that, and we'll just wait maybe just another couple of minutes to see if there are any additional questions.
We have a question from chat. Is that agent the same as the light agent? We'd only have the one agent. We talk about it as a light agent, but it's just the one agent in recast agent. All right, it looks like the questions have kind of died down a bit. Thanks everyone for attending. We're going to send out a recording later today to all of the attendees. So keep an eye out in your email if you want to share this with any of your coworkers. Thanks again, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.